Hello, and welcome to my concert of new discoveries, the amazing lute manuscripts of Orazio Albani da Urbino. I have to say, this is one of my all time favorite projects, not only for the extraordinary beauty and variety of the music, but also for the extremely thrilling backstory to it. So let's get started. Who was Orazio Albani and where did these manuscripts come from? The Albanis were a noble family from Albania originally. They settled in Venice in the late 15th century and soon after that arrived in Urbino, where they became very influential, very powerful citizens and were important advisors and protectors of the Duke at the time. The Albani family's son, Orazio, born in 1576, was sent off to Rome to study the three L's: law, literature, and the lute, which all male children of aristocratic families had to go and study. He must have been quite a precocious lute player because the discovery of these 26 manuscripts in the library of the Albani family, which is today housed in the Villa Imperiale in Pesaro, in the Marche, in Italy, contain some absolutely glorious music, but extremely challenging music. This isn't your typical amateur manuscript where some amateur aristocrat has a couple of lute lessons and tries to play a few little simplified pieces, but he must have been a prodigy. And it seems, to judge by his contacts in Rome, but also the contents of these manuscripts, that he must have studied with at least one, if not both, of the most important Roman lutenists of the late 16th century, both of whose music is represented in these manuscripts, including many, many unique pieces that are new to our catalog. So Orazio Albani was sent off to Rome in 1576. He may have studied with the most famous Italian virtuoso of the day, a man called Lorenzino Tracetti. He was a rather mysterious character for a long time because we have had a lot of pieces by Lorenzini, or Lorenzo, or Lorenzini, or Lorenzino, as he's called in various manuscripts. But nobody knew for a long time what his family name was, and we didn't know very much about him. Due to a lot of detective work, we now know who he was, and we know quite a bit about his career. He first worked for Cardinal Ippolito d'Este in Tivoli, just outside of Rome, where one of his colleagues was Palestrina, and you can certainly notice this by the quality of the counterpoint in Lorenzino's pieces. Lorenzino died in 1590, and so you might think that since Orazio was only 14 years old at that time, he was unlikely to have studied with such a great master. But Lorenzino made a career teaching the children of wealthy aristocrats. He was consistently courted by important the King of France, the Duke of Bavaria, and other very prestigious courts, and he turned all of them down because he apparently made quite a lucrative living teaching the children of aristocrats and also playing at their banquets and parties and so on. And so it's quite likely that arriving in Rome as a precocious 13-year-old, Orazio may have had some lessons with Lorenzino. It's interesting that we have so many heretofore unknown works of Lorenzino in these 26 manuscripts that it seems likely he must have gotten them either from Lorenzino or from a student of his. Now, I realize I've gotten ahead of myself a little bit because I have to tell you about the discovery of the manuscripts, and then I'll tell you about the other important figure involved. So, my friend Franco Pavan, who is the lute professor at the Conservatory of Music in Verona, Italy, and an outstanding musicologist, has maintained for years that we basically know what music is held in all of the important Italian libraries. He has gone through everything, looking for miscatalogued pieces and even looking at smaller libraries, and came to the conclusion that the place where we are likely to find new, unknown music is in the libraries of aristocrats. Now, there are hundreds of aristocratic families in Italy, dating back to the 15th century, and almost all of them were involved in the arts. Almost all of them studied music, and almost all of them have libraries that are full of important documents, including music. The problem is they're reluctant to let anybody into the libraries to study and see what's actually there. They basically don't want people like you and me sniffing around in their palazzi to see what might be in the libraries, even though they're not interested particularly themselves. But Franco has tried for years to befriend aristocratic families to be able to be permitted to look at the libraries to see if he could find something. And he's absolutely convinced there is a lot of important music still undiscovered in these libraries. Well, a number of years ago, he was allowed to look at the library of the Albani family in the Villa Imperiale in Pesaro, and he discovered these 26 lute manuscripts, also manuscripts of vocal music, manuscripts of music for viola da gamba, for keyboard, and so on. The lute manuscripts contain 656 pieces, the vast majority of which are unique. They're unknown in any other sources, and the quality is consistently very high. These were pieces written down for Orazio Albani, either by his teachers or he copied them from other manuscripts, but they're of highly virtuoso works of high quality. So that's the background to these manuscripts, and when Franco discovered them, he went through and made an inventory of everything and made arrangements with the library, the Biblioteca Oliveriana in Pesaro, to digitize the whole collection to make it available. And he passed on PDFs of the manuscripts to me so that I was able to study them and choose a program. Okay, so that's the background there. I'll tell you more about Orazio Albani a little bit later, but let's get to the second important figure in these manuscripts, a mysterious lutenist by the name of the Cavaliere del Liuto, the Knight of the Lute. Now, he was mysterious because apparently he did not want people copying his music. He thought the music was ephemeral and it was for him to play and for him only. So he did not allow his music to circulate, and therefore we only have had until now a handful of pieces of the Cavaliere del Liuto to survive. By the way, John Dowland recognized the quality of both of these two important composers represented in these manuscripts, Lorenzino Tracetti and the Cavaliere del Liuto, because in his variety of lute lessons of 1610, Dowland published a fantasia by each of them. So these were very important figures at the time, even though they're quite obscure today. So the Cavaliere worked at the Palazzo della Cancelleria in Rome for Cardinal Montalto, and I suspect that Orazio Albani had lessons with the Cavaliere, because the fact that there are so many pieces by the Cavaliere in these manuscripts suggests to me that he was okay allowing a student of his to copy out these manuscripts for personal use as long as they were not distributed. And so we have the largest number of pieces by the Cavaliere in existence, and they're of extraordinarily high quality. So it's already exciting to find a collection of 656 largely unique pieces of any kind, but the fact that they're of such consistently high quality makes this manuscript or this collection of extraordinarily high value. Now, I'll mention the pieces that I'll be playing in a moment, but just to finish the biography of Orazio Albani, after he studied law, literature, and the lute in Rome, he returned to Urbino. He became the Urbino's representative to the Vatican, and was very highly regarded by the church establishment at the time. He was also made a senator of Rome, and his grandson became Pope Clement the 10th, I think, 10th or 11th. So a very influential family. He had a son called Malatesta Albani, who was a virtuoso viola da gambist, who worked at the Pope Urban VIII's house at the Palazzo Barberino as a viola da gamba virtuoso. And that collection of the viol music is another study in and of itself. So we have a wide variety of pieces in these manuscripts, ranging from toccatas, some of the earliest toccatas in existence, remembering that Lorenzino Tracetti died in 1590. We tend to think of the toccata as being associated with Frescobaldi in Rome in the 16 teens and 20s, but we already have these fully developed toccate in the Albani manuscripts by Lorenzino Tracetti, as many of which are anonymous, but there's so much in his style I've attributed them to Lorenzino. We have quite a lot of beautiful contrapuntal fantasias, really some of the most superb works, contrapuntal works for the lute that I know of anywhere. And there are dozens of these in the manuscripts. I only have time to play a few of my favorites, but you could do another few programs with all the pieces that are in this manuscript. Then we have intabulations of vocal pieces, both French chansons, the famous Lasso's chanson Suzanne un jour is in at least 3 or 4 different versions in the manuscripts, and I've just chosen my favorite of those. There are dance pieces of all the important dance forms, Pasamezzi, Pavane, Gagliarde, Volts, etc., balli of various types. And there are a number of variation pieces, variations on ground bass pieces. One of the most outstanding works in the collection is a setting of the Romanesca by the Cavaliere del Liuto. Certainly one of the most sophisticated sets of variations that I know of from the 16th century, an extraordinary piece. There's also a setting of the Folia, and this has quite an amazing passage in triple meter in the middle of it, which has a series of chord progressions of dissonances that I have only encountered in one other piece, and that's in Monteverdi's Ballo delle Ingrate, which was written after this piece was written. And the fact that the Cavaliere and Lorenzino Tracetti were so beloved and so well known in Italy at the time makes me wonder whether this music might have been known to Monteverdi and he borrowed some of these ideas. By the way, there was also a connection to Gesualdo, in that one of Orazio Albani's teachers in Urbino, when he returned to Urbino, was a friend of Gesualdo's. And in fact, Gesualdo loaned the Cavaliere del Liuto and an archlute to use for a number of years. And so it's possible that Orazio Albani may have met Gesualdo. And there is one very nice intabulation of an early Gesualdo madrigal in one of the manuscripts. I haven't included it in the program, but I may play it afterwards. So we have this embarrassment of riches. It was very difficult for me in playing through all of these pieces over and over again to limit myself to about 70 minutes of music when I could easily have put together 4 or 5 programs from the music of this collection. So I hope you enjoy this. It's a unique opportunity to hear music which has not been heard since the late 16th century or early years of the 17th century in some cases, by 2 of the most important but mysterious figures in Italian late Renaissance instrumental music. I hope you enjoy the program. Thank you.